For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Motsabi Hwayane. Political analyst Aubrey Majibri discusses the downgrading of South Africa's bond rating and outlook, as well as the overall state of the country's economy. Following the fact that South Africa's economy contracted in the first quarter for the first time since 2009, do you think the country risks an economic recession, and what would the political consequences of such an eventuality be?
Well, personally, and I'm not an economist, I'm less worried about the prospects of a recession, something the governor of the Reserve Bank and the finance minister assure us is not going to happen, than I am about the very strong possibility of stagflation. And that worries me in terms of the impact it might have, both on the poor and the middle class. The middle class are in a precarious position given how heavily indebted they are. And the conditions of the poor and the working class have been dire long before this moment. And therefore, whether we have a recession or not, given that projections for growth are being downgraded, the possibility is that our economic lives are going to be much worse before they get better going forward.
What is your view of the downgrade of the South African economy by certain rating agencies?
Well, it was not unexpected because there have been for months now concerns, particularly about instability in the mining sector. Now, if you are sitting as an investor in New York or Paris or London, what you see is not instability in one sector of the South African economy. That instability to you represents instability in the economy as a whole, and therefore affects investor decisions. Now, while there is a lack of perspective sometimes, while sometimes the perceptions of investors about how bad things are in South Africa are wrong, we should take cold comfort from that. Because if you look at the narrative behind the downgrade by S&P and the narrative behind the decision by Fitch to downgrade the outlook to negative, that narrative informs even further the perceptions of the international investor, and therefore the basis on which decisions are made. And those decisions are not in the interests of our economy and our country. And what is critical for me is how we as a country respond, how at leadership level across the board we respond, how social partners respond. Now, if our response is to turn on one another, which is what we're doing at the moment, if labor turns on business and business turns on labor, and other social partners turn on government and government turns on other social partners, we're not going to find the appropriate response to what may become a crisis if we don't make the tough decisions that need to be made.
You quote the Zulu saying, that is, everything eventually comes to an end. Are you concerned that South Africa is going to lose its ability to continually pull itself back from the brink of disaster?
You know, my fear is this. If you look at South Africa from, let's say, 1990, there have been many predictions of South Africa collapsing politically and therefore economically thereafter. But we have been able to pull ourselves from the brink. I'm beginning to ask the question whether we have relied too much on this ability to pull ourselves from the brink and think we will always have the capacity, therefore, to pull ourselves from the brink, because there's a possibility there will come a time when we are wrong about this capacity of South Africans to pull themselves from the brink. And if I'm correct, what we are doing at the moment, we are playing Russian roulette with the future of our country, especially since we seem to be refusing to unite internally behind a common vision for our future. But more importantly, we seem to be refusing, in pursuit of very narrow interests, to unite behind short-term interventions that will buy us the space and the time to engage in the kind of medium to long-term planning that as a country we need to do.
While acknowledging that South Africa suffers a leadership deficit and a chronic lack of leadership across the board, you also state that we lack wisdom as a country. Why do you say this?
You know, I look at business. I listen to what is coming out of government and the ruling party. I look at labor, and I come to the unfortunate conclusion that they all engage in the futile exercise of maximizing narrow interests, when it should be obvious that if different parties try to maximize their interests, it can, first of all, only be at the expense of others, in this case, other social partners. But also when that happens, actually what you are doing, and this you don't see, is to limit your chances of maximizing your interests, because it's not possible that everyone can maximize their interests at the same time. Therefore, this pursuit of narrow interests by the social partners can only result in mutual destruction, unfortunately, to the detriment of the country.
Do you think that government, business and labour will be able to find mutually beneficial solutions and arrive at a unity of purpose, or that levels of conflict will simply continue to rise in South Africa?
Well, in the short term, there's no sign. There's no visible or demonstrable evidence that the social partners are prepared to unite behind a common short-term strategy that will take us out of the current crisis. And in this regard, I hope I am wrong. That notwithstanding, I have no doubt that the social partners will eventually find one another. It may be because of a deepening crisis that they do, but a crisis is not a guarantee that what will follow it is unity of purpose.
That was Aubrey Machigre discussing South Africa's increasing economic uncertainty.